Mozambique plans to establish a sovereign wealth fund later this year as it prepares to start natural gas exports that the government says may generate $96 billion in revenue for the world's third poorest nation. The authorities are in the process of finalizing draft legislation that will govern the management of the fund. Finance Minister Max Tonale said in an interview on Thursday in Washington he expects the fund to be operational before Mozambique's first liquefied natural gas exports begin to flow in by October from an offshore project that ENI SPA is developing. Mozambique's central bank in October 2020 published a proposed model for the fund, which is said will build up savings and contribute to fiscal stability when commodity prices fluctuate. Under the plan, half of the state's revenue should go to the fund and the rest to the government's budget during the first 2 decades of LNG production. Now, a sovereign wealth fund, in case you don't know, is a state-owned investment fund that invests in real and financial assets such as stocks, bonds, real estate, and precious metals. Most of the wealth funds are financed by revenues from commodity exports or foreign exchange reserves held by the central bank. Now, other African countries that have established a sovereign wealth fund are Gabon, Senegal, Algeria, Botswana, Nigeria, Uganda, Namibia, Mauritania, Libya, Ghana, Equatorial Guinea, Angola, and Rwanda. So this morning, we get to focus on Mozambique's resolve to start a sovereign wealth fund. This is Business Edge. I am Lekon Onobanjo, standing in for Tolu Lokpe Adeleru Balogun. And joining me from Johannesburg, South Africa, is Ekos Akpokabayen, Chief Investment Officer, Ovid Capital. You are welcome, Mr. Ekos. Thanks for being part of the program this morning.
I appreciate you, Lekon.
Now, the Minister of Economy and Finance in Mozambique has come out to say that his country is planning on launching the Sovereign Wealth Fund vis-a-vis gas exploration in the year 2022, that is October. But then you look at the country on the list of poor countries index, it is said to be the third on that list. Now, how significant is this gas exploration, of course, the launching of the Sovereign Wealth Fund? What does it actually mean for Mozambique?
I think this is very great news. This is a very welcome news. As you know, Mozambique has had a difficult time with rebels and fighting in the north of Mozambique. I think we spoke about this sometime last year. So, and we all know that the height of the conflict was because of this gas exploration and the benefits it needs to bring to the country and what part and the distribution. But this kind of announcement is something we want to hear in the continent. If you look at Mozambique currently, its GDP it's around 14 billion, and that's expected to grow to 17. But we don't see that growing because of the floods they had last year, which they're still, coming out of, and also because of COVID and the conflict. But when you hear the kind of revenue that will be generated from the gas exploration, 96 billion, that's a lot compared to their current GDP. So that's a lot for Mozambique. And for the government to plan for a sovereign wealth fund, part of the revenue going to a sovereign wealth fund is very, very, very welcome, and that's a wonderful news.
But then don't you think that's a bit too ambitious? That is being too ambitious because the declaration, according to the minister, is that they are projecting that about $96 billion of revenue will be coming in. The project is yet to kick off. So don't you think they are shooting beyond the gun?
They say, you have to prepare. You have to prepare yourself, and there has to be a will. We've seen it in other places around the world, especially in the Middle East. I don't think they're going too forward. I think it's the right thing. A lot of work has been done. Experts and economists have been waiting for this for quite some time. Before it was even announced about the gas exploration in 2020. I mean, this has been coming for a long time. I don't think it's too early. You need to lay out your plans. I know most of this announcement came in with the IMF meeting in New York, and I think it's the right thing. You know, as a government, you have to give experts, investors, economists. You have to give your plans, and with this kind of plan, it's not something you can keep in the wraps. It's a very good plan. My concern also, you know, just like you mentioned, there's a lot of sovereign wealth funds in the continent. But when you look at those values of those sovereign wealth funds compared to other places in the world, it's almost like a joke. For example, Nigeria's sovereign wealth fund started in 2011 with $1 billion. It's grown, it grew up to 3 billion or 3.5. I think it's now down to about 2 billion. I mean, if Mozambique can get it right, we want other countries in the continent to follow suit. Just to mention, I think the largest sovereign fund is in Africa, I'm talking about in Africa, it's about 5 billion. When you look at countries like Japan, it's 1.5 trillion. You look at Saudi Arabia, it's over 900 billion. And these are, when you look at, compare globally and you look at Africa, the largest sovereign fund is just below about 5 billion. So for Mozambique to take this step, and just like you mentioned, what sovereign wealth fund will be doing is to stabilize the economy and give opportunity for those funds to invest in other sectors and other assets within the continent. And so it's very welcome, especially when the fund is robust enough.
Talking about the sectors that the revenue that would come in will be shared and expended to, what would you say the plans are for the allocation of the gas dollars that will be coming in by the reason of this new development?
Look, one of the things I know the ministers, Tonella said, the guidelines, they put in the guidelines. But one of the important things, not just the sector, is the region. For example, countries, you know, in the southern region will be able to go to this fund to access finance and capital for their project. So these are quite important. Obviously, the different asset class which the funds will be aligned to go for, and we don't expect to go for very risky asset class. Traditionally, there are different investment grades which sovereign funds can invest. And I'm sure they will follow the same principle that is done globally. Because what you don't want the funds to do is to depreciate. You want those funds to increase year by year and protect the wealth of the people of that country.
So based on the report that we have, the Italian energy corporation, that is ENI SPA, has already invested in Mozambique's gas projects to the tune of about $7 billion in its Coral South projects. Now, we have ExxonMobil and, of course, Total Energies, who are also coming on board. So I'd like to ask, are there other African countries that Mozambique is hoping to partner with to make this initiative more robust and, of course, more visible?
Look, you know, Mozambique is part of the SADC, and I know South Africa has played a lot of role. Just last week, the South African president announced that troops are going to remain in Mozambique for 1 more year, which is going to cost South Africa about 3 billion rand. South Africa also has a problem with its energy supplies. And so, you know, apart from investment, the supplies and the benefit of the resources and a stable Mozambique is very important for the region, especially in South Africa that bears a border with Mozambique. I know within SADC, there's been commitment by the president of Mozambique to allow opportunities for the SADC countries. But what you need to understand is that as a region, the region needs stability. When it's good for Mozambique, you know, it removes a lot of pressure on South Africa. When it's good for Zimbabwe, it removes a lot of pressure. So sometimes you don't look at yourself, you look at your neighbors. You want it to be good for them. And this investment, we are happy this investment are coming out of the continent. We prefer good dollars and good investment to come in from Africa and to develop Africa and these sectors. So, you know, this is a very welcome. I'm so thrilled and I'm so full of joy hearing this kind of views. We just need to stay calm and watch it as it progresses.
Well, I tell you, because one of the challenges that we cannot fail to mention is the issue of transparency and accountability on the part of government. It's one of those challenges that so many African countries, African governments are faced with. So the authorities, according to what we heard, are in the process of finalizing draft legislation that will govern the management of the fund, as we understand. Now, however, Mozambique is said to have scored just 26 points out of 100 on the 2021 Corruption Perceptions Index reported by Transparency International. So I'd like to ask, how well do you think that this government can be trusted with these funds that will come in? How do we know that they will manage it well and ensure that it is spent judiciously?
Yes, you're right, Lekon. That was my consign. They scored 26. They're 147 out of 180 countries. Corruption has been an issue, but sometimes we could challenge those metrics that have been used to measure, especially in Africa. A lot of African countries have not done very well in that corruption. But not to say there's no corruption. Our hope, and when you look at the population of Mozambique, there are 31 million people with a GDP of about 14 billion. This is a huge windfall. And that's why I said in the beginning, it's good to lay these things in the beginning. And yes, there's corruption, but it was inevitable due to mismanagement and the kind of, revenue they're generating currently. This is going to increase, and it's our hope and it's our wish. And when you look at economy, when there's a lot and there's a lot more, we expect corruption to reduce. When there's not enough to go around, then you see people dipping their hand in the honey pot. So for us and for me especially, this move is quite good, and it will be managed by the top level in government. And this fund is for the country. It's a sovereign wealth fund. I do not see, this is not your normal government thing where different government departments and ministries where people can have access easily. This is going to be different. So once this legislation is done, as the revenue comes in, it will be going to these funds. I don't think it's something we should worry much about, the corruption for this fund. I'm very optimistic, and I have good optimism.
All right. Well, if you're saying the Mozambicans don't have to worry about how its governments or how its government's hoping to spend the revenues that would come in, but then one thing we can always worry about is the issue of insecurity in Mozambique. So we get to join you in a few minutes so that you can tell us what you think the government can do to bring an end to the insurgency that has plagued some regions in that particular country. So I'll be back with you in a while, Ekos. Just stay with us. Now, as Mozambique prepares to export natural gas and launch a sovereign wealth fund towards the end of this year, ENI, Spar, Total Energies, and ExxonMobil top oil mining industries have already bought into the plan. One thing remains, though, the deplorable security situation in some parts of the country, as I mentioned earlier. So let's quickly run off on this break, and when we return, we get to engage Ekos more to tell us what can be done to bring to an end the spate of insecurity in that country. We'll be back in a bit. Do stay with us. Well, during the course of the show, we told you that Mozambique is planning to establish a sovereign wealth fund like other top African countries. And my guest has been Ekos Akpokabayen, Chief Investment Officer, Ovid Capital. So this is part where I go back to you, Ekos. Before we talk about the security crisis in Mozambique, let's quickly look at Russia and Ukraine. Without disrespect to the two countries and the crisis going on there, we understand that this has actually exacerbated gas shortages, exports to the European countries within that continent. Now, tell us, how significant is Mozambique and other top African countries' role in providing gas, not only for Europe now, but then for Africa?
I know the conflict has created an opportunity, especially supplying gas to Europe and elsewhere. Everyone knows there's been a lot of sanction, and Europe is looking for alternative source of its gas and not rely on Russia. because they don't see a friendly Russia in the next few years, even up to a decade or more. I don't see that. And so this has created a huge opportunity and a gap for countries like Mozambique to step into that play. For example, we've seen, because of the conflict, we've seen a country like Rwanda having a partnership with the United Kingdom, and then discussion with also Poland and some other countries in Europe on how to take refugees. And I'm sure they will benefit financially from those kind of deals. And the same thing, I know the European countries will be exploring where to get stable and steady flows. And I'm sure there'll be already discussions for the need of Mozambique. But like we have said many times, these European giants are very big, and they know how to sway things to their advantages. My hope is that those people in charge in government making those deals should be very smart this time around and look to the long term. Don't sign deals that will not be to the benefit of the country or the continent in the long run.
Well, okay, now, Ekos, as seen in Nigeria, you agree with me that insecurity is counterproductive. Of course, Mozambique has had its own fair share having to struggle and cope with insurgency and security crisis in that region. Of course, we understand that there was a time that Total Energies had to force out its workers to keep them safe when invaders, came to its facility. And of course, it is necessary to protect your workers. Now, what do you think the government can do, or how do you think it is coping with tackling the insecurity challenges that it's faced with? What can be done to bring to an end, or if not even bring to an end, to stem the tide of insecurity in the country?
Look, security is very, very, very an important factor in terms of investment and long-term protection of assets and life of people. So this is very important, there's no doubt. Without security, you can talk about economic progress and prosperity. And this is one of the reasons during the Abuja Accord of '99, it was important to keep silent the guns across the continent. And so when you look at Mozambique, unfortunately, it was a sad thing to see this kind of Islamic-backed insurgency in Mozambique, northern Mozambique. But, there was a SADC came together, and it was not something SADC, Mozambique had to call on the AU. The SADC countries came together and insisted that they would put in resources and back Mozambique and the president to make sure they give them military resources to help Mozambique to quell the insurgency. But I might say, I know for sure it's been very hard in history to see anywhere where you have stopped violence with violence or with military mind only. So once you have military mind, there has to be political will and discussions and negotiations to solve the issue of insurgency. Because obviously there's grievances, and even if we call it Islamic-backed insurgencies, they're using the locals who are aggrieved, and the nepotism we see in Mozambique and the corruption and the level of poverty. Once government can give hope, and I'm thinking with this opportunity of this kind of fund, and the young people can see this as a future for them, and there'll be no need to join these kind of radicals trying to destroy the country. And for the report we are getting, it's been improved a lot since last year. And the Italian giant is also said to go in back there, and also ExxonMobil. So a lot has improved, but there's still more that needs to be done there.
Prior to discovering gas, Mozambique had relied on its very active mining industry. Now, how has it fared with its earnings, and how is that able to support the lifting of gas in the country to bring out the country from its economic doldrums?
I like to, when you say these kind of things, I do appreciate these questions, but I think it's also good to remind our viewers, your viewers as well, that as these countries progress, you look at when Mozambique had independence, you look at the struggle it's had, and the education level of its leaders at the time and what we have now. Why am I saying this? Because some of the mistakes that have been made in the past, we know Mozambique has been relying in mining. And that's why I said in the past, our leaders didn't have the kind of education we have now, the exposure, and they didn't live to see the repercussion of those bad deals that were made. And some of those deals were made decades ago, and now we're seeing they're not good enough. So yes, Mozambique has not benefited so much from its mineral resources in the past from mining, and we know that, and even tourism. And that's why we've seen how the country has gone downhill since the time of Michel Samora. And so we are hoping now, and like I said, when you look at the GDP, this for a country of 31 million people with the kind of resources they have. So my hope is that with this new windfall, this discovery of a large quantity of natural gas, that the deals that will be made now and the benefit to the economy and the people will not be the same as in the past.
Okay, so finally, Ekos, we understand that there have been situations of ecological disasters in sites where gas have been found. Now, is the country working on maintaining the sites? And of course, what about the workers in these areas? Will they be relocated in order to protect them and, of course, to protect investments in these areas?
When you look at natural disasters around the world, for example, you know that poorer countries will always feel the effects because they don't have the resources and the financial backing to mitigate some of these natural disasters. Last year, there was a huge flood in Mozambique, and the poor of the poor will suffer more from this. I can see clearly, an average Mozambican takes home minimum wage is about $60 a month. That's nothing. So when you look at this, workers have been exploited based on the economy and what is going on there. So obviously, government has good intention, but when there's no resources or financial resources to take it to the level we want to see in other places in the world, then it looks like the African countries like Mozambique are not doing enough. So I like to point, economists and other experts to don't look at one side, look at the reality. But their laws, the procedures, their guidelines, all are in place. But the truth is that there's not enough resources in the past to guide them. But with this windfall, unfortunately, there has to be this exploration. The country is very poor. They need these resources. And there will be laws, and I know that there's more green bonds and green funds that we want to come in to protect the environment. We've seen a lot of that globally and in the continent. But it's also important as well to get people out of poverty.
Okay. Well, Ekos, I must say thank you so much for joining us on the program. You have expressed so much hopes, and we hope that hope will definitely come to bear and bring about its socio-economic transformation for Mozambicans. Thank you so much, Ekos.
Thank you, Lekon.
All right, now, nothing good comes easy, I reckon, and Mozambique needs to fight its demons if it hopes to transform its economy and change its status on the Global Poverty Index. The set date for gas exports and launch of the Wealth Fund is October this year, and definitely we will keep on monitoring the story and bring you the details on the show. We quickly go on a break to bring you NC4 to watch. Don't go away. Let's quickly take you through NC4 to watch. Looking at the top 4 developing stories in the business world. The rand edged lower early on Tuesday, extending a heavy fall from last week when sentiment towards the risk-sensitive currency slumped. At 0640 GMT, the rand traded at 15.72 against the dollar, around 0.2% weaker than its previous close. Reduced data pricing boosts consumer satisfaction with South African carriers. This new revelation is based on a research finding Mobile users in South Africa have responded positively to the lowering of data and telecommunications prices by some of the country's largest mobile operators in 2021. And this is according to Data EQ's latest South African report. Moving on now, the number 2 cryptocurrency in the world is supposedly weeks away from the merge, a transformative June upgrade of its blockchain Ethereum to make it faster, cheaper and less power hungry, holding out the prospect of a meaner and cleaner crypto future. And finally, industrial metals from copper to iron ore recouped some of Monday's losses after China pledged more support to help revive an economy that's been imperiled by an escalating virus outbreak. The country's central bank vowed to increase monetary support to the real economy, especially for industries and small businesses hit hard by the pandemic, it said in a statement on Tuesday. And that's it on today's edition of Business Edge. For more engagements, you can visit our social media platforms at News Central TV. You can also download our mobile app on App Store and Play Store and visit our website www.newscentral.africa. See you some other time. I am Nikon Obanjo.